fire drills, so if the alarm goes off, please leave the building in an orderly fashion through the nearest fire exit. Please use either the fire exit through the main doors of the hall or fire exit in the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the island in front of the main entrance to the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded. Please switch off mobile phones or turn them to silent. Please note that the toilet and hand washing facilities are in the foyer area. Members, I would like to remind you that if you wish to use the toilet and hand washing facilities at any time, you may excuse yourself from the meeting without the requirement to raise your hand at your own discretion. Members of the public, whilst you are of course entitled to film or take photographs during this meeting, can I please emphasise to you that this should be done without disruption to the meeting and can only be done from a designated area in the public seating. Can I please therefore ask you to raise your hand clearly in the air now if you would like to take photographs or film this evening? Thank you. I will now ask officers to assist you. Members, please be upstanding to receive our chairman, Councillor Jack Lawman, Reverend Kim Lepley, and our Chief Executive, Jonathan Stevenson. Thank you.
Would you please be seated? Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Fill all with your grace as decisions are made that may affect all those who live under the charge of these councillors in the Rochford district. Give the council members wisdom and guidance as they deliberate on the items before them. May every decision be made righteous in your sight for the benefit of all who live in the Rochford area and for your glory. We give thanks for all who work for the district council and for all those that work for the councillors to support them and the community that they serve. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to say the Lord's Prayer, and if you'd like to join in, then please do so. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So may God the Father keep you in his care, the Lord Jesus Christ be your constant friend, and the Holy Spirit guide you in all you do, now and always. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be with you and all whom you love this night and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you. Do you want to step out?
My dinner.
Be careful. Right. Right there?
Thank you.
I've got the lowest chair. I've got the lowest chair. Well, welcome members, welcome to the meeting. Just to remind you, voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for then and then against recommendations and then for abstaining. Given the size of this room and the numbers of us that are present, can I please ask that you raise your hands clearly so it is visible to officers when they count the votes? This meeting is being live streamed. Therefore, ensure you speak clearly into the microphone in front of you and switch it off when finished to avoid feedback noise. The normal rules of debate apply. No member shall speak for longer than 5 minutes, and can I please that you do not repeat anything previously said. All those indicating to speak will be given an opportunity to speak once. We will now go to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. And we have, sorry, couple of your thing. Right, we have apologies from Councillor Elliot Mason, Councillor Bob Milne, and Councillor Mrs. Leslie Butcher. Are there any other apologies? Councillor FD.
Councillor Arthur Williams.
Thank you. Any others? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Item 3, announcements from the Chairman, Leader and Page Services. Mr. Jonathan Stevenson has nothing to say. I've already checked with that, but I'd just like to bring to your attention, really, my dinner at the end of this month, the 22nd. It's going to be an excellent evening. And remember, we've got all the people, the citizens and people getting awards at that meeting, so it's quite important. We've got some distinguished guests arriving. So if those that, I don't want you to miss out. So those that haven't come, the door's still open. And also I've got a quiz at the end of the month on the 30th in here, like we did last time for charity. So I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you. Right. Right. Item 4, public questions. There are 4 public questions, and I shall invite them in the following order. Question 1, I invite Mr. Phil Shaw to read out his question. Would you like, I was going to say.
That's it. Thank you, Chairman. My question is to the lead member, Resources, Climate Change and Economy. I've noted from the fees and charges reported, item 7 on the council agenda for the 20th of February, showing that costs have generally increased well above the current level of inflation of 4.2. Most notably, car parking fees across the district. Ockley Woods shows an increase of 33.3% for up to 1 hour. Can the lead member of Resources, Climate Change and Economy please tell me what revenue is forecast to be achieved across the areas as a result of these increases in comparison to 2023 and 2024? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hoy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Shaw. As regards the 33.3% increase Mr. Shaw highlights, this represents a 10 pence per hour increase in the current charges of 30 pence. It has been arrived at by rounding up to the nearest 10 pence. As specified in the budget MTFS report, paragraph 7.5, the yield from fees and charges increases, including increases for statutory charges for planning, amounts to £325,000. This additional income is essential to enable a balanced budget. I'd point out we have still managed to reduce some charges, as will be outlined in the budget presentation. The current level of inflation is lower than the general rate used to increase fees and charges, but the council adopts a policy of applying the rate of inflation applicable when the fees and charges are being formulated which was 6.7%. This has followed a period when inflation was running at above 10%. I would argue that the proposed increases are reasonable, especially as evidence suggests that Rochford's charges in general are lower than other comparable local authority charges. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw, do you want to respond to that? No, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, question 2 then. I invite Miss Angela Marriott to read out her question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. To the Leader of the Council, having listened to the answer to Councillor FD's question last week's full council, can the Leader explain why it take until after the election to come forward with options for Rochford, despite the asset delivery programme, which includes Rochford assets originally being discussed by the new administration back in September? Is it because, as per subsequent reports, the Freight House is deemed cost prohibitive and therefore will remain mothballed for the foreseeable future with no real plans to open this venue for the community?
Councillor Mason, or is it, yeah?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Angelina Marriott, for your question. Shortly before 7th of September, full council legal advice recommended that the report and decisions were placed into exempt because of issues of commercial sensitivity. This places an obligation on members and officers to comply with that when answering questions, seeking information and assurances, and even to respond to public speculation. The matters of commercial sensitivity are taking longer to resolve than anticipated, but nevertheless, officers have been undertaking work on potential options of business cases on all assets, including the Freight House. In order to bring these forward into a public consultation with residents and stakeholders, further detailed work needs to be undertaken to satisfy due diligence, and this will not be complete before the council enters the coming election period. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do you want to respond? No? Chairman, Councillor Mason.
Chairman, could I just point out on a point of order that on public questions on notice, there are no supplementals. Thank you very much.
Right, the next one is question 3. Invite Mr. Simon Smith for his question, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My question's to the Leader of the Council, and I do understand he'll be passing this to Councillor Newport for answer. A recent Freedom of Information request revealed that apart from officer attendance at actual meetings, the Council had no idea how much time had been spent on the conversion from a portfolio administration to a committee administration. How can this be squared with openness and transparency, with the public being given such scant information about what is going on, what work has been held back, and what has not been done as a result of this process? Thank you.
Councillor James Newport.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your question, Mr. Smith. Officers have kindly forwarded me the response to your request for information. The response did, in fact, not say that this council has no idea of the time spent on this project. The response stated that because the officers do not record time, no definitive answer can be offered to your question. You were advised, however, of the time spent on attending meetings of the Constitutional Working Group, which is recorded information. It's the word definitive that is really important here. I'm sure we would all agree that to provide a guess or an estimate of the time, thereby providing unevidenced information, is less preferable than providing the honest response that no time records are available. To address the part of your question that asks what work has been held back or not done as a result of this process, the answer is none. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I now invite Mr. Chris Taylor to read his question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak this evening. My question is for Councillor Michael Hoy. Given that the council has just announced spending £25,000 of the additional £114,000 government final settlement on a consultation with the public on regeneration of Rochford, and that the local plan employment assessment showed risk to jobs and services in Hockley, most notably the Foundry Business Park, will the council commit to spending some of the final settlement on a similar consultation in Hockley?
Thank you. Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the question, Mr. Taylor. The £25,000 for consultation on the redevelopment or regeneration of Rochford has been based on the fact that the council offices were based there in South Street and are still based there in South Street. And given that any changes would impact Rochford, we felt it was appropriate, given the demand from other councillors in the area and to the east of the district, that that was looked at. At the moment, there is a Hockley Area Action Plan, which does, as it stands, protect certain aspects of Hockley, and in particular, the Foundry Business Park, which you mentioned, is designated as a business area and should not be developed for housing. I cannot commit any spending on consultation at this point in time for Hockley because the budget is balanced at the moment, and any changes to it would affect something else. However, I would suggest that this may be something that could be championed through Hockley Parish Council, which I'm aware you are a member of. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, petitions. There are none. Agenda item 6, member questions on notice. There is one member question on notice received from Councillor Mrs. Eileen Gadsden.
To the executive lead member for leisure, tourism and wellbeing. Clements Hall Leisure Centre, with popular classes, group classes being fully booked by members a week in advance and waiting lists to attend these classes up to 50%. This does not include non-members who are not included on the waiting list. With capacity down from 3,099 classes in 2019 to 1,768 classes in 2024, membership increased over the same period from 3,097 to 3,233 and increased charges across the board. Does the lead member for leisure agree that it's time to give value for money and increase the number of popular classes available instead of justifying the waiting list by offsetting the percentage of availability on a few unpopular classes against the percentage on the waiting list of the popular classes to show capacity and not members' requirements?
Councillor Mrs. Gooding.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you to Councillor Gadsden for your question. Yes, I do agree to both offering residents value for money and that we should look to increase the number of popular classes available where there is identified demand and it is financially viable. as has been discussed by the council with Fusion Lifestyle. Additional classes are planned to be added to the group exercise programme at Clements Hall from April. The booking system has also been reviewed and is due to be upgraded. Engagement with key stakeholders and the community took place in October and November last year to support the work being carried out to procure a new leisure centre from April 2025, when the current contract ends. This provided the council with both an insight into the current service and to draw out aspirations for the future service. On that note, I would like to thank officers and the Leisure Working Group for their work and commitment to ensuring that we meet our timelines. As we continue the procurement process, the group exercise programme at both Clements Hall Leisure Centre and Rayleigh Leisure Centre will be kept under review. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Glasson, do you wish to respond?
No, I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Julie Goodin. I'm very pleased that this administration is committed to taking on board the members' wishes and ensuring that any arrangements in the future meet their needs.
Okay. Right. I think we're on item 7 now for me. Fees and charges. Members, before I invite Councillor Michael Hoy to introduce this report, I would like to remind you that Appendix A has been updated as the original appendix had minor formatting issues and columns under the leisure section were not displayed correctly. An email containing the updated appendix was sent to you by Democratic Services yesterday to clarify. Councillor Mr. Hoy, Michael Hoy, can you introduce this report?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry for members who have to hear me talk quite a lot tonight. Fees and charges. This report sets out the proposed fees and charges applicable for 2024-25. The charges have been arrived at by applying the rate of inflation at the time the charges were formulated, which was 6.7%. This follows the Council's approach over a number of years. Officers have considered the impact on customers and benchmarked against other council charges in arriving at the charges we are proposing in this report. In some cases, charges are not increased by the standard 6.7%, where there is evidence from benchmarking that they would be set at a different level or where national regulations apply. In some cases, a charge may be increased by more than 6.7% because a figure has been rounded up. For smaller charges, this can be noticeable, such as for the parking in Hockley Woods. But it is necessary to ensure simplicity and clarity for customers. And for some of our parking machines, the minimum change on charge needs to be a multiple of 10 pence. I'd like to draw attention to the proposals to make burial fees for under 18s free, which was previously for under 12s. We have also introduced a formal policy of not charging for NHS mobile units in our car parks. Also, we are removing charges for Cherry Orchard Country Park and have reduced the half-hour charges for the Market, Castle Road, Bellingham Lane, Southend Road, Freight House and Back Lane car parks. The proposed increases generate approximately £325,000, of which £180,000 relates to statutory increases in planning fees. This £325,000 is essential to enable a balanced budget, which is the next agenda item. I move the recommendation R1 to agree the proposed fees and charges for 2024-25 as shown in the attached appendix.
Councillor Newport.
Chairman, I'd like to second that, please.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. This was the report that we were told would be brought before Council in December, and here we are in February looking at the report now. But I'd like to centre my points tonight around paragraph 2.3 on page 7.2, which reads, I'll remind members, for the purpose of fees and charges, inflation is normally used as at October of the current financial year. This has not yet been released, therefore the September rate of 6.7% has been applied, and we've heard reference to that earlier this evening. The October inflation figures were actually released on the 15th of November, over 3 months ago from today's date, and 5 months on from September. I raised this very point when we had overview and scrutiny a month or two ago. And if we look at the CPI, in October it was 4.6%, November 3.9%, December 4%, January 4%. And we're told in the report that it will yield in cash terms £325,000 additional revenue. 4% would have yielded £195,000, £130,000 less. And we believe on this side that would have been a more appropriate figure to use, because I'm not moving away from the fact that under a Conservative administration, we too increase fees and charges, but it's by how much. Worthy of particular note is the removal of fees and charges for the freight house in Rochford. No, not to benefit the hirers, but because this means it will remain closed for at least the next municipal year, and shows a clear lack of commitment by this administration to the Rochford district as a whole. Didn't quite see where the humour was, but I'll take that. A quick scan through Appendix 1, pages 7.4 to 7.22, provides clear evidence of this cross-party coalition of a hollow commitment to helping Rochford district residents through the current cost of living crisis by increasing fees and charges by more than the current rate of inflation. And I look in particular at parking, at sports facilities, and those who have been bereaved. So, Chairman, the proposed increases on fees and charges are morally and ethically wrong, and for that reason I regret we cannot support them on this side. A more appropriate level would have been around the 4% mark. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. I'm happy to respond certainly to Councillor Wootton, and I won't be taking any lectures from a party who elects Liz Truss as their leader, where we have faced 14% inflation
Surely that's
in
point
this
of order.
country.
That's point
fees,
of order.
as
Point
we
of
said-
order, Chairman. I take
No,
great exception because I take that personally. So I think Councillor Hoy ought to withdraw that comment.
I'm withdrawing no comment because it's factual, and it's my opinion. That's fine. I understand the point you're making about inflation currently being lower than it was when these were set. These were set using the September figures because at the time they were set, the October figure was not available. As you're aware, the setting of fees and charges does take a considerable amount of time and energy on behalf of both officers and members, and to recalculate them now would have taken more resources than were available at the time. The increases are fair, and we have lowered, as I've said, we've lowered fees and charges. Cherry Orchard Country Park no longer has charges. The half-hour parking charges have been reduced for the car parks I mentioned earlier, so I'm quite happy for these to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Councillor Bishop Belton.
Thank you. It's my understanding that in previous years, we've been able to do fees and charges after October when the level of inflation was set as per the standard policy. So I'm confused as to why this year there wasn't time. But that aside, whilst I completely understand the need to increase fees and charges, I am disappointed with the percentage that's been applied, that it's over inflation, but moreover the inconsistency across the district. Now, I understand the rounding up of 10p's and the 33% in Hockley Woods. Could we have left Hockley Woods as it was? Probably yes. We're trying to encourage people outdoors. But is the increase in parking charges an attempt to reduce car usage as part of the declared climate emergency, or is it purely to generate income? And why is it so inconsistent across the entire district? You've pointed out the reduction in charges completely at Cherry Orchard, but the increase at Hockley Woods, and I just wonder where the logic is being applied. Thank you.
Spearing. Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you, Chairman.
Oh, I was going to answer the question.
Can I just ask if any consultation has gone out to any of the sports clubs, particularly in relation to pitch hire? Because as I understand it, the increases that are being proposed could possibly mean that a number of our clubs, small clubs, will disappear, which will mean that a number, particularly of our younger generation, will have no organised sports facilities. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hoy, you wish to speak?
Sorry, I was going to answer the previous question. The discrepancy between Hockley Woods and Cherry Orchard Country Park is based on the previous administration's assessment of the two areas. Hockley Woods car park has a particular problem with businesses parking there and people using it for the railway station. This is what we are reported. This is what the information we are given says. That's why the charges have to remain there. Whereas Cherry Orchard isn't used by businesses or used for a railway station, and we felt it was appropriate that the open spaces should be free for use on that basis. With regard to Councillor Sperring's answer, all the fees and charges were put through the relevant directorships and then lead members to look at, and based on their consultations, the figures which we are producing tonight were the ones that we arrived at. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mr. Bill.
Thank you. If I can just come back on that point. Is Councillor Hoy suggesting that businesses and commuters are using Hockley Woods for up to 1 hour and that's why they needed a 33% increase? Because I would say that's probably at odds with how commuters and businesses work. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor FD.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to go slightly back to the alternative pitch uses, why does it cost an extra nearly 6% to open a pitch on a Sunday than it does on a Saturday? Because it's over £127 more. Just have interest.
Councillor Hoy, do you want to reply to that?
That might be a more relevant question for the officer. Thank you.
Okay. Perhaps if I just take some more questions first and then we'll go on, because I've got Councillor Constable want to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Councillor Hoy, he made a big thing about taking away the charges for the burials for under 18s. It doesn't mention anything within the cremations. Can you assure me that that would be carried across the board for cremations as well for under 18s, or whether it's just purely for burials?
Councillor Hoy.
We don't actually do cremations, but it's for all burials. It's all for all cremation pots. It's for reinterring, reopening any graves. So it's for everyone under 18 who is buried in our cemeteries. It will be free. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Gadsden.
Page 7.6, I noticed that there's no increase on park home site licences. Is there a reason for this? Addressing obviously Councillor Hoy.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Gadsden, because that was the very question I asked as well when it was given to us. We have to provide evidence that the costs of our inspecting park homes has increased. If we want to increase them, we are not able to provide that evidence because the fees haven't increased. Our costs to inspect them haven't increased, so we therefore cannot increase our charges. Thank you.
So can I come back?
Councillor Sperry.
Thank you,
Can I come
Chairman.
back to that?
I did ask if any consultation had gone out to the clubs about the impact of this increase on pitch hires, and was given an answer which doesn't correspond to the members of various football clubs that I have contacted. They know nothing about any consultation, and this has just come as a fait accompli to them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor. Councillor Hoy, you wish to respond to any?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Perry. I haven't got any direct information available to me tonight, but I'll take that away and get back to you if that's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Gadsden.
Referring back to Councillor Hoy's point about justifying increases. Surely all the officers and staff of Rochford Council have had a wage increase, therefore there must be additional costs. And I'd also like to refer to the recalculation of charges being very difficult and the strain. My understanding is that any accountant with a spreadsheet can put a formula in and adjust those within a couple of seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, members, sorry. Councillor Hoy.
Thank you. The officers have to rework the costs for it. It's not just this is governed by legislation and they have to follow the legislation in how they arrive at the fees. Following the legislation, it was not possible to put up the fees for park home sites, much as I wanted them to rise. I use spreadsheets all the time. However, just putting numbers into a spreadsheet isn't how we work out what the fees and charges should be. There's a lot of background work to it prior to that to see if they're justifiable, how they work and how they will affect people and residents. Just because we change or use an inflation rate at a point in time, it is not as straightforward as you say to just change a figure. That would give us a different figure, but it doesn't actually give all the information we need.
Thank you, members. We're going to take a vote now.
Sorry, can I just
I
address
didn't,
that?
did I give you,
Just one
did I give you, did I
second.
give you the floor, Mrs. Gadsden?
Thank you.
Did I?
No.
Then sit down, please.
Oh.
Thank you. We're going to take a vote. Well, I'm the chair and I don't expect people to bounce up and down without me in some sort of
Sorry,
charge.
Chair, I haven't had an answer
I
to my
did have my
question.
hand up.
You said you'd given Councillor Hodson, Mr. Hodson, a minute to formulate a reply, and I haven't had a reply.
Right, I'll invite the officer to respond, then we're going to take a vote on all of this. Oh, did I have you down? No. We'll take you first, Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a little bit concerned about the Leeds members' reply or comments on Cherry Orchard Park. For two reasons. One is that it is used by workers. Just in case he hasn't noticed, there is quite a substantial industrial estate currently being built directly opposite the entrance to Cherry Orchard Park. My main concern, though, is by removing the fees for the car park there, one of the reasons it was put in place was to deal with traveller incursions, illegally putting themselves in the car park. By having charges in place, it meant a whole set of different rules and regulations could be brought into place to actually deal with the traveller incursion. The fact that there's no fees and charges on that, I would be interested to know how they're going to deal with that issue as and when it will occur.
Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Those discussions were had. We were aware in the executive that that was one of the reasons we were told that charges are put on to deter gypsy and traveller incursions, I think, to use your words. After the discussions, I'd have to ask for officer recollections, but it was decided that that wasn't needed or required. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I was going to invite Mrs. Mason, Councillor Mrs. Mason, then I would refer to Tim. Oh, it's Holden's going to do it, is he? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. It's on. It's on, and we're not loud enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start again just so that everyone can hear me. I'm not going to talk about any specific charges because we will all have views on certain items within the budget, and some of those will be conflicting views and some will be views of consensus. But what I would like to do is to take this opportunity to thank the finance manager and the director of resources for the amount of work that they put into this fees and charges. It looks simple. I've heard someone say it's just a spreadsheet. It is not just a spreadsheet. There was a lot of work that went into that. And whether you agree with it or not, we should acknowledge the work that the officers have done. So that's what I would like to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Marcus Houghton, do you wish to make comments on all of this? Marcus?
Thanks. So can I just ask you to repeat the question, please? There's been time has lapsed.
The question was, why is there a difference in alternative use of pitches on a Saturday and a Sunday to about the amount of £127 or about 5%?
So it's to attempt to try and encourage teams to consider using the pitches on Saturdays. The demand is heavily skewed to Sundays at the moment, and so we do actually struggle to actually have enough pitches on a Sunday, but there is always use and availability on a Saturday. So it's just to try and nudge teams to consider whether the Saturday use is more appropriate.
Okay, so Mr. Goethen.
Sorry, I'd like to come back with Christine, Councillor Mason's marks. I wasn't putting down the officer's work. I was pointing out that with a spreadsheet, if you have already done a calculation and have got your results, it is quite a simple mathematical formula to reduce it by 1 or 2%. And I also would like to say that I think the financial team behind this has been amazing and supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. I intend to put this to a vote, members. We had a good discussion. The recommendations are there, and that's to agree the proposed fees and charges for 2024-25 as shown as in the appendix. Can I have all those in favour? Okay. Thank you, members. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? One. That's it. Right. Thank you, members. That's been carried 23 for, 11 against and 1 abstention. Thank you, members. We now come to agenda item 8, to consider any reports from the executive and committees to council. Agenda item 8.1, the 2024-25 budget and 24-29 medium-term finance strategy referred to the council by the executive. Councillor Hoy, I believe you're producing this.
Thank you, Chairman. Just detach that, be easier. We're here tonight to approve a budget which will deliver public services to all our residents. That must be kept in the forefront of our minds throughout this debate. As with many public services, resources are stretched, but we are focused on delivering those statutory services we are required to provide, together with our strategic priorities, making the best use of the tools and resources available to us. The headline proposals for the 2024-25 budget and the 2024-29 medium-term financial strategy are a proposed council tax increase of 2.99%, the same as last year. No borrowing over the medium-term financial strategy. Council fees and charges generally rising with inflation at the time they were formulated. A balanced budget for next year, as well as a balanced budget for 2025-26 and 2026-27, with no use of general reserves to support those budgets. This demonstrates a sound and responsible approach to managing the council's finances, despite severe pressure on local authority budgets as a result of inflation and government policy. There is a great deal of uncertainty regarding the economic backdrop and government funding for the budget and MTFS. We can maintain our minimum level of working balances or general reserves at 10% of net revenue expenditure in accordance with the council policy, and which is acceptable to the Section 151 officers' assurance statement over the medium term. The table in paragraph 7.2 summarises budgets for 5 years. There are projected shortfalls in years 4 and 5. Whilst these shortfalls are of some concern, they are only predictions at the very extreme end of our projections. And in the context of substantial uncertainty. Despite this uncertainty, there are some actions planned over the medium term designed to generate income and reduce costs. These are set out in paragraph 6.5. As a council, we continue to strive for efficiencies, but we recognise there are ongoing cost increases and pressure on income. Any spare funding will be used to support investment in assets and public services. The overall position is delicate. Any significant unfunded costs could prompt the need to reduce services or to borrow. For instance, if the council tax increase was reduced by 1%, it would cost £450,000 over the MTFS period and £90,000 every year thereafter. In relation to earmarked reserves, these are reserves set aside for specific purposes. They are listed in paragraph 15.9. They demonstrate how reserves are to be used to fund the capital programme. At the start of this year, they stood at £13.3 million, but are projected to be just below 5.1 million at the end of the year. The use of these earmarked reserves is planned, and they are not being used to fund ongoing expenditure, only one-off costs investing in the future of this district. As regards the capital programme, we're presenting a 5-year programme that invests in the whole district and the services the council provides to our residents. To avoid borrowing at this time, we are using receipts from asset sales and earmarked reserves. Whilst we have identified some specific schemes, a number of others will be subject to value for money assessment starting in 2024-25 to decide which should be prioritised. This is explained in paragraph 13.4. A key deliverable for the joint administration is the investment for the Millen Arts Event Centre. This is a strategic endeavour aimed at providing the venue with the optimal conditions to thrive and serve its community. By enhancing its facilities, programming and infrastructure, the centre gains the necessary resources to attract diverse audiences, host a broader range of events and offer enriched cultural experiences. To conclude, members should understand that the whole of local government is going through especially challenging times. We only need to look around the country and even closer to home in Essex to see how easy it is to get into extreme financial difficulty. Here at Rochford, we have our aspirations, but also many of the same pressures faced by others. I'm therefore pleased to be able to present a budget that may not provide for what all members want. It doesn't even provide for all I want, but it does represent a responsible approach to good financial stewardship. We are elected to represent our residents and to seriously weigh the choices we have to make, many of which are not easy. The decision to approve the budget is in many ways the most important annual decision faced by us as councillors. I would therefore urge you to debate this report, but ultimately to vote for its approval. I move that recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 6 be approved and that recommendation 4 and 5 be noted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm seconding those recommendations, and I know that we've spoken of this earlier, but I really would like to thank Tim Willis and Kerry Cox for all the time, patience and expertise they've extended to Councillor Hoy, myself when asking questions, and more particularly to all members of the council as it went through the proper constitutional process. So thank you very much to both of you, and thank you to members for sitting through all of the presentations that we've had on the budget. They have been exhaustive. So thank you very much indeed, and this is how we get to the position we are today with the recommendations you have printed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, I'd just like, before we go any further, just to let you know, there are 6 recommendations set out from 811 to 813, but recommendation 3 requires a recorded vote. So if we do a vote, item 3 will be a recorded vote. So, Councillor McPherson, you want to say something?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm hoping, as the only independent, non-aligned member here, I come with a pragmatic, open mind with no political allegiance. I would like to thank the officers and also the lead member. This report as a whole, most of it I will agree with. Councillor Hoy already knows I only have one problem with it that I can find. The report came before overview and scrutiny last month. And if I can refer you to page 8.1.25, I raised concerns to the figure in excess of 1 million allocated to be invested in this building. My comment was quite clear that I do not begrudge in any way this investment, but for me, it's hard to approve without seeing the evidence to support this. And as Councillor Hoy just included in his introduction, value for money is taken into consideration and the assessment of it. Now, if I can refer back to minutes from February 23, within that there were several recommendations. Now I'm just going to include two of those recommendations when overview and scrutiny back in February 23 reviewed Mill Hall. Number one recommendation was any future model for the Mill Hall Arts and Events Centre is clear and brought to full council for discussion. Recommendation 4, there was 8 altogether, I'm not going to read them all out, that we revisit, following meaningful market research, the cost of improvements, works to the Mill Hall, taking into account the needs of a modern media facility. The request for the meaningful market research was put forward by Councillor Reeves. There were several other members. That was a unanimous agreement, yet I have not seen that meaningful market research. So I am hoping that the lead member for Public Space and Assets could share that information with us. That would help me greatly in understanding our investment into this building and the need for the expenditure. As with evidence, I would then wholeheartedly support it. Without evidence, sadly, I cannot. I also pointed out at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that this is a substantial investment into one area. To the public, it could be perceived at the detriment of our other villages and communities, pan the district. We are, after all, please remember members, district councillors. Yes, we're here to represent our individual wards, but here to work collaboratively for the whole of our district. So I'm hoping that the lead member will be able to furnish us with information that will help me support this budget in its entirety. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Wootton.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, can I echo the leader's comments, Councillor John Mason's comments in respect of the support that we on this side have had from Tim Willis and the team. It's been absolutely superb and he has made plenty of time for us both collectively and individually. So thank you very much to you and your team. I guess, having stood here for the past 4 or 5 years, we look at these things a little bit differently when we're in opposition compared with when we're in administration. But if I look at the revenue streams, just go through a few headings. £693.7 thousand government funding guarantee grants. Fees and charges, additional £325,000. Windfall interest on deposits due to higher interest rates, £375,000. Proposed council tax increase of 2.99%, approximately £250,000. The ongoing cost benefits from the partnership with Brentwood Borough Council, £160,000. So total income growth of the order of £1.8 million, way above and more than compensates for cost inflation, which in the report we are told sits at about £816,000. So I agree in the report where it refers to current financial volatility and general uncertainty within the local government sector. That's referenced in 3 paragraphs, 4.1, 14.6, 17.1, and other general comments. So I'm a little surprised with that in mind, that there appears to be no plan to increase the 10% general fund balance recommended at 6.2, the 3rd bullet point, which is at the lower end of recommendations. There is no fixed lower end throughout local government, I gather. But for example, our partner authority, Brentwood, sits at 20%. And I would have just thought that it would be prudent to look at that. I don't want to particularly delve into all the services, you know, I see there's no mention of how we're actually going to proliferate the services provided by the Highways Rangers. There's no evidence of how the quite creative scheme on community safety, the £120,000 that we as an administration last year set aside, right across the district, echoing the point that was made earlier, that we want our communities right across the district to thrive. Councillor Eileen Gadsden came up with the concept of forming some sort of credit union. I realise that that process is underway, but there's no mention of it in the budget. And that is another idea that she and we on this side came up with to support hard-pressed residents through the cost of living. And indeed, I believe that the reintroduction of Rochford District Matters, the magazine, I'm not sure where we are with that. I presume that's been scrapped. So, Chairman, in conclusion, the financial position of Rochford District Council is the envy of many local councils, a legacy of fiscal responsibility over many years by the previous Conservative administration. I'm pleased that people find it so humorous. A no or a very low budget gap over the medium term. Personally, I think the principle is right to increase council tax, but not all the elements that we've talked about. And we've referred to fees and charges, we just don't agree there, given the other revenue streams. When I was the leader of the Conservative administration until May 2023, I've sat and listened to some of the very people here tonight who make up the current administration tell me that council tax should be frozen or even reduced. Fees and charges should not be increased. Yeah, fees and charges should not be increased. Yet despite other very healthy revenue income streams outlined previously, when they've had the opportunity to carry out what they suggested I should do, at the very first opportunity, they do not practice what they preach. I sincerely hope that over the next financial year, the cost of political aspirations will be tempered with commercial activity. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right. Okay, members, who have we got? Councillor Hoy, can you reply to Councillor McPherson's?
So I think Councillor Belton's indicating to speak.
Sorry?
I think Councillor Belton was indicating to speak. That was all.
Councillor FD. Well, why don't you just form a line and we'll all queue up and have a chat? I mean,
Sorry, Chairman, I
get on with
was
this.
saying I
mean,
think Councillor Belton was indicating. I saw a hand go up. I may be wrong.
Councillor Belton's hand was up before mine. Mine was up next.
Pardon?
Sorry, Chairman. Councillor Belton's hand was up before mine. Mine was up next.
Well, if you want to give way, Councillor Belton.
Thank you. I would have been happy to wait for Councillor Hoy to answer Councillor McPherson's question, but I'll come in now. Thank you. Firstly, I want to echo the points that multiple members have made. I know firsthand how much work goes into this by members and lead members and officers, so I fully appreciate where we are. I genuinely had hoped I would be able to support the budget in its entirety, but because we've also seen the increased fees and charges, there's been an increase in government funding. I find it difficult to also then accept the 2.99% increase. Now, typically, I would support that because I believe it's the responsible thing to do, protects our residents from service cuts whilst allowing for reinvestment into the district, which Councillor Hoy has alluded to in his opening remarks. But this budget, however, isn't just taken via the precept, it's taken by fees and charges that are above inflation. And I argue the point that we couldn't have redone them in October, since as this report is only coming forward in February. I would have recognised that had the report come forward in December. It's also spending significant amount from reserves, which, as we understand it, are already at the lower end of the scale. In addition, it's benefiting from significantly increased government support this year. Now, having said all of that, if I could see some substantial benefit for the residents, I may still have supported the budget. But what I can see is 1.4 million to relocate the offices, money being invested in Mill Hall, which I'm not against, but as Councillor McPherson has alluded to, there is still no plan on how we're going to make the venue work. For example, there's no budget for an events booker to go out and find acts to come to the venue and generate ticket sales to start to bridge the enormous £350,000 gap. I do not see any real investment set aside for anywhere else in the district, or an opportunity to do so without borrowing, which still comes with significant interest repayments, something we as the Conservatives have always managed to avoid. I'm also disappointed to see that there doesn't appear to be any extra money being allocated to community safety, and I could be corrected here. I did email the lead member for Communities and Health on the 12th of February asking how much of the £120,000 budget that was allocated last year under the Conservative administration had been spent and what on. I'm yet to have received a reply. But according to the budget, there is an estimated £74,980 for the forthcoming year. Is that remains from last year, or has anything been added to that? And if so, how much? At a time where we are seeing a huge rise in vehicle theft, racist graffiti, vandalism, fly tipping and other crimes, do the administration not want to support the wider district with community safety initiatives? And if so, is £74,980 enough to do so when almost half of that money is potentially going to be spent on lighting in Rayleigh? Overall, I recognise creating a budget is hard work and difficult decisions have to be made, and you will never please everybody. But it's with regret that I cannot support this budget, as there appears to be too much taking and not enough giving back to the district as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I cannot also support this budget that will implement a capital programme allocating millions of pounds to a business case. We've moved to 6.1, long-term financial stability. The MTFS will have a deficit of over 1.2 million over the next 5 years. With no business plan / case, will we as a council have to borrow something we've never done before to make ends meet? And I'll jump to 13.2, where we've mentioned the business plan. What business plan? Still waiting for a business plan to come to council. 13.3, external borrowing. Why should my residents of Great Wakering or any residents to the east of the district subsidise the Mill Hall to the cost of £350,000 a year with no business case to offset the losses? What happened to preferred partners? Also, the imminent leisure contract. We will need to borrow to offer our residents a decent service. Thank you for Councillor Gooding saying we're getting a new leisure centre. Hopefully it would be great in the east of the district in Great Wakering. That'd be really great. So borrow our residents a decent service. These facilities are for the most part in the west of the district. Hopefully that will change. With inadequate public transport to Hawksmoor and Rayleigh. 14.7. This administration does not have a track record for delivering savings. The past Conservative administrations delivered services with was prudent with our money. The current administration has, with few exceptions, has always voted against all past budgets. And this leaves me with no confidence, especially in the 5-year plan. So I will not be supporting this budget, which then includes the MTFS in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank the officers. I know how much work has to go in to preparing a budget from experience. I will find it very, very difficult to disagree with Councillor McPherson's comments And what I'm mainly concerned about is that the residents that live in the east of the district will be subsidising what is happening in the west. It is very difficult for those people on low incomes or fixed budgets when they live in areas like Great Wakering, Pagglesham, those sorts of areas. You cannot use public transport on a Sunday to come to Clements Hall. You cannot get to Rayleigh. So there is no facility for those residents within those areas. It is bad enough during the week. So, for example, where I live in Barling, I cannot get a bus to Clements Hall if I wanted to go swimming. If I could, if I went by the bus routes that you'd have to take via Southend, with a family of 4, we calculated that with the cost going into Clements Hall as well, would be around £50-odd. So I do feel that I cannot support this budget purely because I think there's too much disparity across the district. We do hear the buzzword of the day seems to be levelling up. I think this has gone missing on this occasion. I can't see where the levelling up is. The freight house is mothballed with no indication as to how that's going to change. The potential in Rochford Town of losing the council offices will affect the businesses vastly in the small square around Rochford. I can't see how that improves the facilities within Rochford itself. So I come back to my point, levelling up. No, there is no levelling up. There's just disparity across the districts. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I seem to hear a lot, time and time again, about this east-west divide, almost. And it's really disappointing because when I'm at another council, I hear about a north-south divide. Councillor Steptoe's mentioning about buses today, which is council's not responsible for. In fact, Essex County Council are, which he's a member of, and he could well look to provide or try to provide buses for his residents out in the east of the district, as he's part of a group that's in control at Essex. So rather than come here and say to us all about lack of buses and crying about it, he should really go away and deal with it. The freight house being closed, that was closed by the Conservative administration. It wasn't closed by this administration. We're just picking up the pieces. The other thing that I just want to touch on, again, I heard from members on the opposite side about community safety. Community Safety Fund, it's great, and I applaud them for allocating a budget for it, but they did nothing with it. We have delivered with that budget. We've delivered CCTV for Rayleigh with that budget, but we haven't had to spend as much money as what they were going to spend on it because we've unlocked funding from other sources. We've got money from the PFCC to bring in other schemes. So rather than say, oh, you haven't done this, you haven't done that, perhaps they should really think about what little they did and how much we've done. Thank you.
I mean,
You already have. You already have.
If I may, Chairman, we're just debating the budget, and I think that's a reasonable and what residents expect us to do to get the best for them. I haven't had an answer, albeit I recognise Councillor Newport has partly answered some of my question. What I wanted to understand was, of the 120,000, is it £75,000 remaining, or has anything been added to that? I'm unaware. And if it hasn't been added, have we spent £50,000 so far? And if so, what on? Now, if that can't be answered this evening, that's fine, but I would like a response to that. I asked for the answer a couple of weeks ago. But the bit that I would like an answer on this evening is, has anything been added, or is that just the remainder? Recognising Councillor Newport may have topped it up via external funds, but has anything been added from RDC for next year? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Tim Willis, our officer, to intervene in all of this, if might get some information.
Thank you, Chair. Intervention might be a strong word, but I can answer Councillor Belton's question at least in part. There was a capital budget in 23-24, the current financial year, of 120,000, and about just under 70,000 of that is left uncommitted. If nothing changed, and in the normal course of events, that would be rolled forward into 24-25, subject to what would be an executive decision in the summer, once we know the outturn position for the current year. What the 50,000 has been spent on, I can't answer, but we've spent or committed 50,000 of that, leaving 70. There is no new 24-25 Community Safety Fund capital budget, in addition to anything that would be rolled forward from the existing 23-24 budget.
Does that answer your question again? Thank you. Right. Councillor Mr McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm still after, I raised a question with the lead member for, just got to get the right title, Public Space and Assets. I'd like to know the evidence for the money so that I can make an informed decision whether I support this budget or not. So I need the evidence for the investment into Mill Hall. And just looking at the minutes of that overview and scrutiny meeting of the 23rd of February 2023, it was Councillor John Mason who moved the motion, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson, that there was the reassessment. Oh, hold on, sorry, no, it's seconded by Councillor John Mason, seconded by Councillor Eaves, that we revisit, following meaningful market research, the cost of improvement works to Mill Hall, taking into account the needs of a modern media facility, and this was carried unanimously. The minutes are clear. I just want the evidence so I know which way I would like to vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, we'll try and answer Councillor McPherson's question as succinctly as I can. However, Chair, if you think I'm talking too much, please shut me down.
I certainly will.
There is excellent. There is a lot to say on this particular building and what has happened and what we as the council have done, are doing, and our achievements to date. I will give a short answer to Councillor McPherson in that the future model of Mill Hall is clear, but our facts have yet to be proven, which is why no announcement has been made. The meaningful market research has unfortunately not been carried out for lots of reasons, but will be as soon as the elections in May are over. I hope that's not inappropriate to say that. I would just like to say, while I am here, that since opening Mill Hall, I have the figures, but I won't give those because it will take too much time. But since opening Mill Hall, we now have a manager, duty manager system in place who extremely well run this building and have done a really good job in coping with many unexpected events that they've had to deal with at Mill Hall, and they have done so exceptionally, in my view. Marketing is being put together as we speak. Responsive repairs have been carried out. Many people won't see, but this building has been kept statutory compliant, and that has taken much work. Cleaning and waste has been dealt with on an ongoing basis. Budget has been spent on insurance, licensing, IT and telecoms, as I think is evident here from this meeting today. Our income revenue at Mill Hall, I have to say, I have been most proud of considering where we started. We were hoping to achieve £50,000 in that area for income to Mill Hall for the public, for the arts and events, held here. We will have, to the end of March 24, had an income of approximately £63,000, which I consider, with what small works to date has happened to this building, I think is exceptional. And the staff that run this building day to day should be thanked for. Now, as far as market research is concerned, the future model we have a plan for, but can I just say, the future model will not be set until the market research is carried out, which will be happening within the next few months. I can give you lots more details, but I can't give you any more specifics apart from what I've just said. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason, you wish to?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to echo what Councillor Mrs Wilson has just said. It's a budget. This is not a committed spend. That amount of money put aside for Mill Hall is the right sort of thing to do if you've decided to reopen Mill Hall and run it as an arts and events centre. It makes every sense to me to put money aside to enable that to be a success. Now, until that research work, that meaningful market research has been undertaken, those monies won't be spent. They're not going to, only the vital amounts that need to be spent on the building will be spent on the building until its future is understood and can be commended on a sustainable basis. I'd just like to remind everyone again, it's a budget. It's not a commitment to spend. This is why we put a budget aside. I'm not sure I can deal with all the issues that were brought up by so many speakers. I'm very sorry you don't like our budget. I frankly didn't like many of yours either. And if we're going to play tit for tat, that's fine too. I'm happy with that. It's a balanced budget. And I did jot some figures down before. We are under significantly strained economic circumstances. We have councils declaring 114s all over the country. We have councils in Essex who are frankly, completely and utterly happy to see how well we're doing. They wish they were doing as well. The budget equalisation reserve, £400,000 has been put aside from the interest that is being earned out of this financial crisis. That will be used over the next 2 or 3 years to close gaps. Councillor Wotton, you mentioned that at the one of the workshops we had. You said, I believe, we always start off with this gap, and miraculously we always close it. I'm very glad we have. Otherwise, we'd be 1-1 forward. But Councillor Wotton, this is a good thing to have a budget equalisation reserve, £400,000. That's very prudent to my mind. We have a corporate priorities reserve of £250,000. That is available to this council for the right and proper projects that come forward. We also have added £255,000 to the capital budget from revenue. I think these are sensible things to have done, and I commend the officers for helping us come up with that picture. Now, I can't deal with all the other items. that were mentioned because I didn't have a piece of paper long enough. But if anyone wants to raise them again, I'm sure Councillor Hoy and I will try and answer them. In terms of the credit union, I've no idea what the funding is going to be required for that. Officers professionally advised me that it's going to be fairly minimal. And I've just advised you where £250,000 corporate priorities exists. It's not been excluded. I wanted the report to come forward much earlier, but it hasn't. That's a resourcing issue. It happens. But we will receive, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee will receive that report on the 5th of March, and it will, with a recommendation from ONS, come to the Executive on the 19th of March. I'd just like to throw something back on the issues of fees and charges, because that was brought back in this debate. I believe that if we'd have followed all inflationary conditions, in other words, all inflation over the last few years, more particularly going back to the time when it was when car parking charges were last increased, had we increased them by all of the cumulative inflation since then, we could have increased car parking charges by 21%, and we haven't. So that's a leaf out of your book, and it's a leaf in ours too. Highways Rangers, that elephant in the room. That is a responsibility of Essex County Council, and out of all of the things we could have done, it wasn't one that took priority. And I'm going to really upset the good lady to my left, because I'm going to remind us, as she would wish to remind you, but I'll do it now. I believe we receive, for cutting of the grass on curbsides throughout the rural part of the district, £30,000 from Essex County Council. Am I right, Councillor Steptoe? You agree with me? Our officer, the Director of Environment, during workshops, has told me that it costs us £200,000. So we're being shortchanged by Essex County Council to the tune of 170. I don't want to add another 70,000 to it and make it around £250,000.
Yeah, 1 minute.
I'm very happy with the budget we've presented. I'm sorry it doesn't meet your approval from the Conservative group, but I hope that other members of the council will support it, and it will form a proper basis for the next municipal year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not an accountant, but looking at the table on page 8.1.17, where it talks about earmarked reserves, it starts off a figure of 13 million and ends with a figure of just over 5 million. That's an £8 million difference. Perhaps someone could just explain to me where that £8 million is going. Thank you.
Are you going to be? Councillor Hoy, can you?
I think it's probably more appropriate for our Section 151 officer to answer that.
Mr. Willis.
Thank you, Chair. The members referring to the table that shows the movement in 23-24, the current financial year, it's using approximately 5 million, and then a further 3.2 million projected for in 24-25. Now, the breakdown of those movements is set out in those columns transferred in and out, and the forecast movement in the year for next year. The largest items relate to the use of earmarked reserves, revenue reserves. That's what this table is, to fund the capital programme. And that's been a long-standing policy of this council to use reserves and revenue contributions to fund the capital programme. The delays and slippage in the capital programme in recent years has meant that there's been a shunting up of a lot of presumed spend, and so use of the earmarked reserves in this year and next year. So the investment fund, for example, is 2.9 million, and the hard soft infrastructure reserve is 1.6 million next year. Those alone account for a large proportion of the reduction in total earmarked reserves. And the reduction overall, I would just add, as your Section 151 officer, from 13.3 million down to 5.1 million over 2 years is a substantial reduction. If that had been caused by having to use reserves to plug an ongoing revenue budget funding gap, then that would be alarming to me, and I'd be telling you that was the case. But the use of the reserves are one-off in nature and time limited. So once they've been used, what they're being used for, it won't require any further funding based on our capital programme, which is where they're being largely drawn from. And subsequent to 24/5, reserves are beginning to earmarked reserves will begin to stabilise. They won't start going up because we continue to have a capital programme that drains all the available earmarked reserves for the capital programme. But they won't continue in a straight line downwards after 24/25, which is when this table goes up to.
Yeah. Councillor Foster, you wanted to...
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to get clarification of a point, and I'm talking not millions, but thousands here. On page 8.1.22, Appendix 1, Governance and Communications. The budget for communication is reduced from 132,400 in 23-24 to 102,570 in 24-25, which is partly as a result of the removal of £20,000 for Rochford District Matters, which is a very much valued publication for residents. Does this mean there'll be no Rochford District Matters in the next financial year?
Councillor Bull, you wish to reply?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'll just address the issue of Rochford District Matters. It is indeed, it's in the bin because looking into it, we found that a lot of residents actually didn't feel there was proper value in it. We've looked and are progressing with other ways of engaging with residents right across the district and at better value for money, should I say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs McPherson.
Sorry, may I come back, Chairman, on that? Just to say, Chairman, that communicating with residents, as we all do, we would say it's quite the contrary. They do value it, not necessarily all of them, but certainly more than actually go and look on websites and search for new news.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. Just to be clear and for clarity, I have not criticised the budget. In fact, I actually commended Councillor Hoy and also the officers. My concern was around the excess of £1 million in Mill Hall. I'd like to thank Councillor Mrs Wilson for speaking on that. Just one point, again, just referring to, and I know it's a budget, as Councillor Mr Mason pointed out, but it does say, and it was actually from this side, the new administration who put forward the recommendations for overview and scrutiny, but it was that the cost of improvement works Mill Hall, taking into account the needs of a modern facility, was to be revisited and the model post the meaningful market research. So the meaningful market research has to feed into the model, just to be clear. All I would ask, so as it was put forward from that side of the chamber, all I would ask is that, as per the recommendations, when that piece of work is done, prior to spending the budget, that it comes to full council. That was the recommendation back at overview and scrutiny. Thank you.
Councillor Mason, you wish to?
Yes, Chairman, I'd just like to assure Councillor Mrs McPherson that on the 7th of September, there was a report on Mill Hall. And if my memory is good enough, it was agreed by full council that once the meaningful market research or whatever other words were used, which were similar, would be brought back to full council. And of course, it will come back to full council. And of course, the budget has been made available. So in the event that, and I hope there is a sustainable model and a sustainable business model for both an operator and the council, that spending will be appropriate and can be applied. But it won't be applied until the case is understood and known and brought to full council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gladstone.
Referring to Councillor Wooden's comment about the credit union, as we remember in December in full council, the administration agreed to set up a fund to set up a credit union in Rochford District. I wonder, is this still the case, and could the money be allocated from the Corporate Priorities Fund to ensure the commitment is followed through? I have got a second question. Shall I ask that while I'm up? Referring to the 151 officer's comments about our earmark reserves, I'm not clear that we have, at the moment, we haven't given full figures on future expenditures, capital expenditures. Although there's £1 million gone into this building, we do not know further costs. I think they're just basic, essential repairs that need doing. But there is a green agenda of solar panels and lots of other things to go. So we don't know the costs of those. There's also improvements to Clements Hall Leisure Centre that need doing. So there's quite a lot of capital investment still to come. So what my concern is, are the present, I think it's about 5 million left in the earmark reserves, are they going to be used to offset the further costs that need doing? And or is it going to be borrowing? And also, will we have enough earmarked reserves to cover any unexpected capital costs or uninsured liabilities? Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Mason.
I wasn't sure if Councillor Hoy wanted to answer Councillor Gaston before I spoke.
Very well. Councillor Hoy, are you in a position to answer the points that Councillor Gaston has said?
I can answer. I thought Councillor Mrs Mason wanted to speak, that was all. I'm not sure. I'm speaking? Right, okay. Earmarked reserves are not for emergency work. Earmarked reserves are for planned work, planned investment. They might have been planned for some years, but they're earmarked for those specific purposes. And then we are spending them, and then we're left with about £5 million of earmarked reserves, which are spending for future projects. Or there might be insurance reserves, or there might be there's a business rates reserve to level that over the years, for instance. So no, we're not using those for general spending or against revenue. With regard to additional spending, I think from memory, but I could be corrected by Councillor Mrs Wilson or by Phoebe Barnes, but I believe some of the insulation work on this building is already included in the capital budget that we have of the 850 for next year, and for I think about 150 for the following years. But in addition, we do have, as Councillor Mr Mason said, the Corporate Priorities Reserve, which is shown on the budget at £250,000 earmarked reserve, which we plan to spend next year, which will be projects which come forward to that will be measured for best value for money, and the investment they bring into the district. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. This might be a bit nitpicky, but we've heard criticism and we've heard compliments going back and forth. But there seems to be a couple of things where we have very short memories. One, we didn't reopen Mill Hall at the cost of 345,000 or whatever per year. The previous administration did. So I'm not quite sure why we're getting criticised for something that someone else did. But one thing I want to ask, and this is not an amendment, you'll be pleased to hear, but I would like to ask the lead member for finance to look into this, because it's a question of concern, and Councillor Mr Mason touched on it. The money that we get from Essex County Council, I thought it was 33,000, but 30, 33, whatever, and we spend over 200, I believe. So we are subsidising Essex County Council or double taxing our residents, however you like to look at it. I have asked in mid-January for where the authority for that extra expenditure came from, and I haven't had an answer. So I'm concerned that the money has, under the previous administration, gone from 30 and crept up to over 200, but it doesn't appear to have been approved by council. So I would like someone to just look into that, make sure that we have authorised that spending properly, and if we haven't, do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just an effort in, how can I put it, clarity. I think members, administration members on this side have been mentioning about certain projects that have been delayed or are yet to come through. And I can accept that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to be done, and that's important, and obviously officer time and things like that. So there's a lot of things that are going on. So there's an answer to a question earlier this evening from Mr. Simon Smith. And he asked, are the public being given scant information about what's going on and what work has been held back and what has not been done as a result of this process? So the answers and the things that have come up from the administration side have actually confused me, because they're saying there are certain things that have obviously in the pipeline are not available, blah, blah, blah. And yet Councillor Newport was very succinct. He said, nothing has been held up, nothing. So I just want a bit of clarity. Thank you.
Councillor Newport, do you want to reply to that?
Do you want me to respond to that, Chairman?
A bit of clarity.
I think, the point I made was we're working on the governance side, and nothing on the governance side has been held up. And that's what I said, none.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe. Members, this will be the last one. I think we've had a real good crack at this, and I think we need to move on. So, Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to assist Councillor Mrs Mason in her point about the grass cutting. This is quite historic. I first came across this issue when I was portfolio holder for the environment some, 10 plus years ago. There's very few members here this evening that would have been on the council at that time. Basically, the 33, at the time it was 30,000, I think it's gone up to 33,000 now, that county paid to Rochford District Council was to cut the verges, the urban verges and the rural verges 1.5 times. I never quite worked out what they meant by half, other than the fact that it was the bell mouths around various junctions. The choice at the time that the council made at that time, and I did raise it, and I looked at the round, I think it was costing us something around 300,000 at that time. I did raise it, but it was the council's decision that they wanted far more aesthetically pleasing urban verges, and the only way they could achieve that would be to pay for it themselves. So that is the historic issue amongst it. I'd be quite happy to discuss this further with Mrs. Mason after the event, because I can throw quite a little bit of light on this particular subject. I did an awful lot of work on it at that time, and I don't disagree with her comments on it.
Thank you very much. We are going to move on. So now, members, what I intend to do is there are 6 recommendations as set out. As I said before, recommendation 3 is a member's vote, so a recorded vote. So what I'd like to do is the other 5 recommendations, I'd like to take it on block.
No.
In that case, we'll have to
Point
take
of order, Chair. 2 are actually for noting, so you can't take them on block. Thank you.
In that case, we will take them one at a time. And so we'll take the first one then, which under recommendations as per your Councillor Hoy, is that recommendation 1, that the 24-25 budget and the 24-29 medium-term financial strategy for both revenue and capital are approved. All those in favour? Thank you, members. Those against? Thank you, members. Any abstentions? There are none. Members, that has been carried, 23 for and 12 against, no abstentions. Thank you. We're going to go on to recommendation 2, that the Section 151 officer be authorised to adjust capital project budgets in 24-25 after the 23-24 accounts are closed and the amounts of slippage and budget carried forward required are confirmed. All those in favour? Thank you, members. Any against? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you. Members, that is carried. 34 for, 1 abstention, none against. We now take recommendation 3, which will be a recorded vote. Thank you. So I want to read it for you first, that the increase in Rochford District Council tax of £7.55 for a Band D property, and that is 2.99%, for 24-25 is approved by recorded vote.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll ask members to clearly state if you're voting for, against or abstain on that recommendation when I call your name. I'll take this vote in alphabetical order. Councillor Mrs. Belton.
Abstain.
Councillor Booth.
For.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Carter. Councillor Constable. Councillor Cripps.
For.
Councillor Cross.
For.
Councillor Efty.
Abstain.
Councillor Eaves.
For.
Councillor Foster.
Abstain.
Councillor Gadsden.
Abstain.
Councillor Mr. Gooding.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Gooding.
For.
Councillor Hoy.
For.
Councillor Knight.
For.
Councillor Lambourne.
For.
Chairman, Councillor Lorman.
For.
Councillor Linden.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Mason.
For.
Councillor Mr. Mason. Councillor McPherson. Councillor Myers. Councillor James Newport.
For.
Councillor Lisa Newport. The Vice Chairman, Councillor Page.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
For.
Councillor Shaw.
Abstain.
Councillor Sperring.
Abstain.
Councillor Squires Coleman. Councillor Stanley. Councillor Steptoe.
Abstain.
Councillor Ward.
Abstain.
Councillor Stuart Wilson.
For.
Councillor Vilma Wilson.
For.
Councillor Wotton.
Abstain.
Thank you, councillors. Has anyone's vote been missed? Thank you. One moment.
So what is it? Members, that has been carried as 23 for, 12 abstains and none against. Thank you, members. We go on to the recommendation 4, that the proposed council tax requirement for the council's own purposes, including parish and town councils and precepts for 24-25 is 8.53, no, what am I doing here? 8,583. It's all right. Start again. It's 8.583 million is noted. Noted. Thanks. Right. Got the wrong glasses on. Right. Recommendation 5, that the statement of the robustness of the estimates and reserves in section 14 is noted. Thank you. And to approve the pay policy statement in appendix 3. So we'll take a vote on this then. All those in favour? Okay. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? That is unanimous and that is carried. Thank you. Right, I think that's the last one. Right, and agenda item, I'm just mindful of the time. Agenda item 8.2, Capital and Treasury Management Strategy 2024 to 25, referred to Council by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I invite Councillor Mrs McPherson.
Up and ready, Chairman. This report was considered by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of February and was approved for referral to full council. It sets out the capital and treasury management strategy for 2024-25. The strategy specifies parameters and criteria to be applied to borrowing and investments for next year. There is not a great deal of material in relation to borrowing as the council has no external debt. I move the recommendation that the Capital Treasury Management Strategy 2024-25 be approved, Chairman.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Wilson.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Right, members, we have a motion that therefore that the Capital Treasury Management Strategy for 24-25 be approved. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much. Agenda item 9, setting the council tax for 24-25. Please, and I invite Councillor Michael Hoy.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm just getting my notes up. Sorry, I'll be as brief as possible on this one because I'm sure everyone's fed up with me tonight. Council Tax 2024-25. This report sets out details of the council tax for 24-25. It has to follow a standard format in keeping with the law. Full council has to approve the recommendations to enable this council to collect council tax on behalf of all preceptors as well as for the district. I move the recommendation set out in Section 4, letters A to J. Do you want me to read those out individually, Chairman, or will you do that?
Well, are you moving that then?
Yeah, I'm moving those.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Mrs Mason. Members, I'll put that item to introduce this report. Where are we? There are 10 recommendations on this. Can we take them all in one go, or do you want to do that separately? You happy to do that? Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just on 9.1, just a clarification. On 2.1, the amount T required, what is T?
Councillor Hoy, do you have a reply for that?
I'm just getting the page up. I don't know if Mr Willis would be able to answer.
Mr Willis?
Thank you, Chair. I can't answer that now. I would need to get back to the member afterwards. But what I can say is it's a predetermined means by which the council tax requirement is calculated, and T is part of the formula to apply to arrive at the gross amount of council tax generated. But by using the council tax base that's referred to as 33,010 within paragraph 2.1. I would need to get back to the member on what T actually is.
Chairman, if I may.
Mr Ward.
I'm sorry to ask this question, but does this then put this whole report into question?
I'm confident that the calculations that sit behind the council tax base and the calculation of council tax for this district, as well as preceptors, is sound, and the information provided in this report is correct. And councillors should be confident that there aren't any errors in this report. The description of what T is, which from looking at the paragraph is referring to the council tax base itself, I think is a moot point in establishing whether or not the information before the council tonight is accurate.
That being the case then, members, so if you're happy, are you happy that there's a lot of them, are you happy that we take all recommendations on block? Thank you. Well, all those in favour, please indicate. Thank you, members. Any against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. We now go on to item 10, appointments of statutory officers, and this is in the hands of our leader, if you like, Mr Stevenson.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members. In front of you, you've got item 10 report with regard to appointment of statutory officers. The report in front of you is due to the impending leaving of Emily Yule as our monitoring officer in April. And as you're aware, we're required to have 3 statutory officer positions, the monitoring officer being one of them. The report in front of you provides an interim solution for that, starting from the 1st of April, proposing Steve Summers to be appointed as our monitoring officer until we appoint a permanent monitoring officer. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions, members? Do we have a proposer? In that case, I propose that motion be accepted. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Newport. Well done. Recommendation is that Steve Summers be appointed as the council's monitoring officer for the 1st of April 2024. All those in favour? Thank you. To the contrary, if any? Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. That's unanimous and that is carried. Thank you. Agenda item 11, notice on motions. There's one motion on notice from Councillor Danielle Belton.
Thank you, Chairman. As of December 2023, the following numbers were accurate in relation to empty properties in the Rochford district: 518 unoccupied and substantially unfurnished properties, 69 furnished properties, which are no one's main home, so second homes, 475 unoccupied properties which are exempt by statute from council tax. So these are properties where the owners have died and probate has yet to be granted within 6 months of probate. Some of these properties have been empty for a long time. Rochford do not currently have or use the services of an empty homes officer, meaning little is being done to actively bring these homes back into use. Given the number of residents on the housing waiting list, as well as the demand for new private homes resulting in constant development, I am asking this council to commit to procuring the services of a neighbouring authority to start working towards bringing these properties back into use at pace. Whilst the 518 homes generate the council an income, I believe the properties being occupied is more important than the enhanced council tax amount we receive. Of the 475 properties that are not currently generating any council tax, these could not only provide vital homes for local people, but could also generate council tax in the region of £750,000 per annum. And although a large proportion of this goes to Essex County Council, the PFCC and town and parish councils, RDC keep a fair share. And regardless, all precepts help our residents one way or another. We can, as part of the work, reach out to Essex County Council to ask them to contribute to the cost of an officer time. Typically 5 or 6 houses come back into use every year, but I suspect others join that list. RDC have historically done okay with empty homes, but clearly we can do more. If we use Southend City Council as an example of an authority that employ a full-time empty homes officer, they have brought over 50 homes back into use this year alone. Before I put the motion forward, listening to points that members have made, specifically Councillor John Mason talking about corporate priorities, if any member of the administration wanted to strengthen this motion by proposing a budget of £20,000 from that corporate priority, I would welcome this. £20,000 would give us a fund to resource an officer. We may not need all of that, and I believe that we could actually generate income, but I would like to see the motion strengthened if the administration sought to do so. So this is a motion, therefore, proposing that RDC commit to procuring the services of an empty homes officer in 2024 and, subject to the results achieved, consider creating a specific post in the future to ensure we are doing what we can to minimise empty homes across the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Ward. Councillor Reeves. I'll just do it.
Thank you, Chair. All parties in the council were asked to present ideas for consideration in the build-up to the budget. To bring this motion now is regrettable with regards to timing. It has been a difficult journey to get to presenting a balanced budget. To bring this motion now means that due diligence is not given time to consider the proposal. In my role, however, I have given consideration to the motion and respond as follows. With regards to the figures for empty homes in the district, as of yesterday, the current empty homes figure is 1,079, of which 397 are genuinely unoccupied between 0 and 2 years. An additional 64 properties have been unoccupied for 2 or more years and are subject to the council tax premium charge. 8 of these are owned by the MOD on Foulness Island. The remaining 618 properties are unoccupied for the following reasons. 447 are exempt from council tax for a valid reason. Mostly the liable person has deceased or is in a care home. 116 are second homes where the taxpayer's main residence is elsewhere. 55 are unoccupied annexes where the annex cannot be rented out commercially to a non-family member. It is impossible with regards to the figure of 397 properties between 0 and 2 years being genuinely unoccupied identified in the figures quoted to further drill down into what the reasons might be for the situation based on the data that the council currently has available. Could some of the properties unoccupied at the time of gathering the stats be between the previous occupier moving out and the new one moving in? We can all quote instances where the legal and financial necessities in transferring ownership have been protracted, which is in some cases has led to the property being empty for a while. My anticipation would be that there could be a further drop in the figure for genuinely empty properties if we removed the anomalies. The council currently has a scheme in place to encourage empty properties to be brought up to habitable standard. The Well Homes Empty Property Grant has been active and available for application for many years. It is available to owners of properties where they have been empty for longer than 12 months. It is not means tested. This is a discretionary grant of up to £5,000 available with the primary objective of paying for major repairs to the structure of a dwelling and amenities within. In preparing for the debate, I requested an update for officers with regards to the take-up of the grant. Officers look back as far as 2017 and have advised there is no record of any applications being submitted between then and now. It may therefore be something that members, being familiar with their ward, could attempt to contact owners of empty properties to highlight the availability of this grant. At the full council on 14th of December, the council agreed to an essential change to the rules around council tax on empty properties, specifically by removing the exemption from council tax after 1 year of being empty, not after 2 years, which had been the case previously. The administration believes that this will give the owners of empty properties pause for thought and genuine encouragement to bring empty properties back into occupancy quicker than previously experienced. Regarding the motion before us requesting funding for an empty homes officer, I've seen evidence of officers being dedicated to this role in the past, whilst not necessarily having the title. The work proved to be difficult and time-consuming with regards to positive outcomes, meaning it was not effective in cost or results achieved. It is important to note also that I am informed by officers that most councils in Essex do not have such a post. Lastly, there is the legal situation. The council cannot legally enforce occupancy. There is nothing in common law that would support that. If an owner of an empty property is fixed on leaving it empty and ignores all the encouragement and opportunities open to them to bring the property back into use, there is little anyone can do. Contrary to the motion, as members will note, I have cited things that the council have in place and have recently changed. That means the council are not ignoring the situation. For the reasons stated, therefore, it is with regret that I cannot support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Hoy, you wanted to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure how to follow that. That was an excellent speech by Councillor Eaves. I just want to be very brief and just raise a few points. These figures are for the Government's Levelling Up Department. Rochford District, which is within the Eastern region of England, has a vacancy of empty homes of 1.13%, not in primary use, compared to a regional average of 2.02%. In Southend-on-Sea, which was mentioned by Councillor Belton, our nearest neighbour, with 83,500 homes compared to our 38,000, the rate is at 1.59%. So what I'm trying to say is that we are actually performing well above average for our region already. So congratulations to Councillor Eaves and his department on that. And again, for that reason, I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Picking up on Councillor Eaves' point of speaking to the property owner of said properties, I'd like to perhaps ask him, and he can look into it. I don't expect him to have an answer here this evening. There is 2 properties in my ward that I have for many years tried to encourage the owner, and in one case, to try and trace the owner. The one that I've been trying to trace the owner of is the property that stands next door to the old police station in Rochford. As you look at the police station, it's the property to the right. I was told some 20 years ago that then it had been empty for some considerable time. I'm pushing, I think it's going to be around 30 odd years. So it would be very helpful if the lead member could actually identify the owner for me there. I don't believe it's on the land registry, and I think that's some of the problem in trying to identify it. Perhaps I'll talk to him afterwards. The other property that I've been trying for many years through various ways and discussions, and getting the property back into use by some means or another, is one, again, it's in South Street in Rochford. It's known as number 57 South Street, Rochford. It's actually owned by Rochford District Council. So perhaps the lead member would like to talk to me afterwards and inform me how he intends to bring that back into use. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must admit, when I read this motion, and I've got quite sympathy with the idea behind it, I think we all want to see empty homes utilised. But it says, I know the figures have since changed, but if we take the figures in the report, 475 unoccupied properties which are exempt by statute, and then it says of the 475 properties, they'd raise £750,000. Well, they wouldn't, because they're exempt. So unless I'm misreading that, that seems a contradiction in itself. But Councillor Reeves has just given us some really good statistics. 618 of those are exempt. Nothing we can do about them. So the only ones we could do anything about are probably the 64, which is unlikely if they're that long, or the 397. But we've done something about it. From the 1st of April, properties that are empty for more than 1 year will now get 100% council tax. So, and this was only done in December, so I'm not actually sure that we should have this detailed discussion tonight, because I'm not sure that the 6 months rule might apply. But assuming that it doesn't, I would say that we need to let that decision that was taken by full council on the 14th of December take effect, and then perhaps revisit this in a year's time. I certainly think this is premature, and I'm not sure that it's effective as it stands. So I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley, then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to remind the council that you haven't got to go more than 100 yards from where we are sitting to find a property in Bellingham Lane, which is empty also. It's owned by a dubious landlord, I believe, but it's only 100 yards from us, next door to the Women's Institute Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Bellwood.
Thank you. A few points. Firstly, thank you to Councillor Reeves for taking the time to consider the motion and come back with a full and thorough response. I welcome that you've taken some time to do that. In response to Councillor Christine Mason's point, just to clarify, the 475 unoccupied properties, the figure has now changed, I recognise, but as at the time, they are exempt because they're currently going through probate, essentially. The point of the empty homes officer is to bring those back into use. It is quite common knowledge that many people, property owners, where a property is in probate, will leave it there for decades if they need to, because they're not paying council tax, there's no associated cost, and that property is rising in value. So it's actually those 475 properties that I would like to see an empty homes officer start to target. That is what Southend City Council, it's one of the areas they are attacking or working on. They have brought 50 homes back into fruition. I made in my earlier statement, RDC have historically done well with empty homes. I'm not denying that. We're bringing those properties back, but in handfuls. We have the opportunity to do more. The figures, the percentages that were stated earlier are actually quite comparable. The 1.5%, I think, was mentioned between for Southend City, albeit they've got more homes. All I'm asking is that we try and do more. I recognise the motion that came forward in December. I certainly supported it. I welcome central government allowing us to put that up to, I think, the 200%, and was glad this council brought that forward. That would apply to the 518 unoccupied and substantially unfurnished properties. The 69 furnished properties are second homes. I agree. There's little we're going to do about that. It's people's second homes. They're people that can probably afford to pay an increased council tax on them. But I strongly believe, and there is evidence to support it, that we could bring more properties back into use. That could potentially bring an income revenue into the council, but more importantly, it could bring homes back into use. So that is why I brought this motion forward. I would like to have brought it forward earlier and included it within the budget, but I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't ready. And I recognised there was a corporate priorities that may be able to support it, because we're only asking for a small resource of around 20k. And I'm happy for the figure to be left out. It's just that that's the figure that I've been told would support this motion. And I'm not asking us to employ somebody to do so. I'm asking us to use a resource. We have resources in other councils across the district, and we have the potential to lean on Essex County Council to share that cost with us. So that is what I'm bringing forward. I'm bringing it forward for genuine reasons. I get contacted all the time, as Councillor Eaves will know, because I'm often forwarding my emails to him, about void properties in this district and people that cannot get housed. And when we are sat on over 1,000 empty properties, they're not our properties, I recognise that, they belong to other people, but I genuinely believe with use of resources, a small amount of resource from other councils, we have the ability to get some of these homes back on the market, potentially reducing development needs and potentially reducing people on our housing list. It's not a political move. This is, and that's why my very first thing before putting the motion was, if a member of the administration wanted to amend this to strengthen it, I would support that amendment, because I believe that this is the right thing for our residents. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Mason. Mrs Mason.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's some confusion here. The report, the motion, reads, e.g. properties where owners died and probate have yet to be granted within 6 months. After 6 months, council tax is charged. Probate, has to be granted, but the council tax is charged. So you're only talking about a 6-month period when you're bringing in revenue. Also, there's other exemptions. There's exemptions for people in care homes. There's exemptions, I believe, for people in prison. There's an exemption for the armed forces. And there's probably a lot more. So the only ones you're talking about are the smaller amount, not the large amount that you ascertain in your report, but the 397 that Councillor Eaves has given us, plus the 64, is the maximum. And as I say, until the report from the 14th of December has had an effect, there's nothing we can do. I totally sympathise with what you're trying to achieve, but I don't think that what you're aiming at and what you're trying to do will achieve the result that you want. Thank you.
Councillor Eaves, is it a question? Because if you've already made your comments, you can have a question.
If I may, Chair, I just suggest a sensible approach to this. We have in December put in a situation which has changed from what has been previous. I think a sensible approach would be maybe to actually see how effective that is, and then maybe in a year or so, when we've got some statistics from that, maybe revisit this. I'm not saying that this is not a proposal that has not got wings eventually, but I think that there would be a sensible approach and a pragmatic approach financially that could actually end up with a result that the council wants by the change that we made in December. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eaves. Councillor Hoy.
Sorry, Chairman, very briefly. Essentially, Councillor Mrs Mason said much of what I was going to say. I was going to probably echo Councillor Eaves' points. There is a new committee system next year. I think this is probably something that might be appropriate for that committee to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Well, I intend to take this to the vote. The motion is by Councillor Belton, and I've got to find it now, that right, the motion is therefore proposed that procured services of an empty homes officer within 2024, as subject to the results achieved, consider creating a specific post in the future to ensure we are doing what we can to minimise empty homes across the district. So, all those in favour? Thank you, members. Those against? I'm going to abstain. Thank you, members. Abstentions? I'm not sure. Right, thank you, members. That is 11 for, 23 against, and 1 abstention. So that has failed. Thank you. Right, we now move on to the next item. Agenda item 12, reports, urgent reports, decisions. There are none. Agenda item 13, report of the leader on the work of the executive. I'm going to invite you, Councillor Mason, if you want to speak.
Yes, please, Chairman.
Yeah, if you like.
Thank you, Chairman, and I did give you a very detailed report a week ago when I asked that, and I did respond by saying it will be reproduced completely in the minutes. So I do need to add, for the benefit of members, that there are further reports to be added to the Executive Committee on the 19th of March. The first one is the Statement of Common Ground with Essex County Council on the new local plan. The second one is grants from Sports England, but I have to advise you, Chairman, that currently, as I understand it, that communication is embargoed. So I'll have to take advice from Emily Ewell as to whether that appears as a report in open or it's in exempt. We do, as members have alluded to this evening, there is a report coming forward for funding of Swain Park Bridleway lighting. And there will, of course, be recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the Climate Emergency Committee. So, Chairman, that is going to be a very long agenda. So I think I better get ready with your pet moment of how we can continue beyond a certain time. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Right, members, that's the end of our. Councillor Newport, you wish to say something?
Thank you, Chairman, for just if business is finished, if you could just, members could just indulge me for one brief moment. Under procedural rule 15.10J, I'd just like to quickly say something. As lead member for governance and communications, I would just like to say a few words of thanks to Emily Ewell, as this will most likely be her last meeting here at Rochford District Council, as Emily is moving on to pastures new. In my opinion, which I know is shared by others, Norwich City's Council's gain is sadly Rochford's loss. And I hope you will agree that we have been fortunate to have the benefit of Emily's detailed knowledge of governance and an unwavering enthusiasm, which has helped to lay solid foundations for the change in governance from cabinet to committee system. I hope all members will join me in wishing Emily every success in her new position at NCC.
Thank you, members. Thank you for that, Councillor Mason. Newport.
Thank you, Chairman.
But I echo that. I mean, I obviously, when we were doing the Constitution, and Emily would come along, and her knowledge and abilities just shone. And we wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for Emily, I don't think. So thank you very much. Certainly I wouldn't. I'd be riding a tango here, wouldn't I? So, right. Well, thank you, members. That concludes the evening. The time there is 9:49, and the meeting is concluded. Thank you.
Members, please be upstanding for our Chairman, Councillor Jack Lawman, and our Chief Executive, Jonathan Stevenson.